Hello, I'm David Sparks, and I make the Productivity Field Guide, where I talk about the intersection of ancient philosophy and modern technology to be more productive. Here's a little clip from the field guide on the maker, manager, and consumer. It took me a while to realize that there's an entirely separate category of roles that are important to all of us. And these aren't roles that we choose, but instead these are roles that we have to fulfill. And I'm going to call them hats just to avoid confusion, but they're the hats of being the maker, the manager, and the consumer. All of those hats are important and we must acknowledge them. And that's what kind of got me into trouble is I didn't. For the longest time, I only thought of myself as a maker. I loved it. Whether I was a lawyer or I was a MacSparky or whatever, I loved making things. And we are all makers, no matter what we do. If you're making contracts or if you're laying bricks, you're a maker. And making is what we do when people ask us, what do you do for a living or what do you do to keep busy? It's making. It always comes down to that. And it's not necessarily something that you do to get paid for. It could be woodworking or gardening or anything you do as a hobby where you make something. And I feel like that's part of our humanness. We love it. It fulfills us. I think it's one of the most important things is to find a maker role that satisfies you. Really, I think at the end of my legal career, I wasn't getting satisfaction as a lawyer. The making part wasn't scratching the itch for me, and that's what led to me eventually leaving it. So we all have this maker, but the problem with the maker, especially in my case, is the maker is kind of a jerk. I refer to my maker as the hippie because my maker cannot stop making. That's all he cares about. He doesn't care about whether or not the dog is fed or the plants get watered or the bills get paid. He just loves to sit here and make all the time. In fact, I'm dealing with that right now because I'm working really hard on this field guide. I'm spending a lot of time on it. And it's going to be really easy for me to let other things in my life crash and burn because that's all I care about when I do stuff like this. And that's what led to me really to this realization about these hats is because I was wearing my maker hat almost all the time. I was completely ignoring the manager and the consumer, and it was causing problems in my life. Eventually, I realized that I had to acknowledge that, yeah, there's also a manager around here. I need a manager in my life. We all do. And we have to wear that hat on occasion. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's what makes the maker do better work. So that leads to the second hat, this manager hat. So where the maker is kind of the hippie, the manager is the banker. He's always on time. He has a schedule. He has a plan. He takes care of all that for you. He does make sure the bills get paid and the dog gets fed and all of that. And we have to let the manager into the room to do his managing thing if the maker is going to be able to make without, going bankrupt. So the manager is an important hat that we have to wear. And once I started to think of it in those terms, it became a lot easier for me to allocate time for the manager to do his job and then leave time for the maker to do his job. One of the interesting insights I got out of all this is I should always try to give them separate time. Never try to do maker and manager at the same time. It just never works. It's like multitasking. It never happens. So then that's that second hat is the manager. When do you manage? How much time do you give the manager? I have a good friend who loves being the manager. He told me he had the exact opposite problem as me, where he would spend all of his time getting everything organized, but when it came time to making, he never seemed to get around to it because he enjoyed the managing part so much. So my advice to him was to do exactly the opposite of what I did, where I make hyper-scheduled block time for the manager to come in and do his job. I told my friend, do the exact same thing, but for your maker. Allocate time for your maker so your manager has to leave the room and let the maker get to work. And he said it's actually helping him out. And I think that's the thing about this maker-manager balance is we have to find our own. Everybody's different. And then that leads to the third hat, which is the consumer, because, we're humans. Our lives are on a cycle. We can't just work all day or we can't just manage all day. We have to have breaks and time to kind of wind down and consume. And the consumer, I think, is a necessary part of that equation. So I can tell you currently, my maker, manager, consumer balance is roughly 60% maker, 20% manager, and 20% consumer. And that really works for me. But it took me a long time to get to that balance. My first estimates were that I could spend 80% of my time making, and that didn't work at all. So I had to figure it out, but it took some experimentation.
As I'm recording this, it's a Monday, and yesterday was my weekly review. And I looked at my numbers for the week. And last week, I only spent 5% of my time as a manager, and usually it's more like 20. And I know that's going to cause a problem. The reason is because of these videos. I've been working a lot on this field guide, and the maker loves this. I'm having a great time as the maker right now, but this is where I get in dangerous waters. It's very easy for me to kind of forget about the other stuff and just let it go when I get in this mode like this. So that 5% was a great warning for me. And this week I'm going to make sure to stop and take care of some of those manager tasks. Now, at the end here, I want to talk a little bit about the consumer more, because I had never really taken my consumer role seriously until I started these experiments. And I realized some things about my consumer self that I never really acknowledged, and maybe these will help you. The first is the things I consume can really affect my mood. And that's obvious in hindsight, but it wasn't for me until I acknowledged it and kind of saw it in myself. There are certain types of media that are just engineered to make you mad. I mean, a lot of times it's these news programs where they just want you to keep watching their commercials and they keep telling you things to get you outraged. Don't do that. Don't let that consumption foul your mood. I mean, this is consumption time. Why would you want to be angry afterwards? The same thing goes with certain types of media, even fictional stuff. Like I sometimes, when I was younger, used to like watching the movies where everything blew up and all that. And lately I've got to the point where that doesn't do it for me anymore. I feel like it's just kind of empty calories. And so I don't try to watch that stuff. I'd rather learn something. Another thing about consumption I've realized is that intentionality makes a huge difference, especially today, because the consumption channels have gotten really good at trying to keep you there. YouTube has the algorithm, television has all these different networks. Everybody wants you to sit there and flip through channels or just take the next video YouTube throws at you and just waste your whole day. That's not the way to do this. You want to be more intentional about it. Figure out the kinds of thing you want to consume. Go find it, consume that, and then stop. And it's a much healthier relationship with consumption. You can even leverage it. Like my maker side has been super curious about stained glass for some reason. I keep seeing it in Craftsman furniture, and I'm thinking, yeah, I could do that. And so I have queued up on YouTube a bunch of good videos about making stained glass. I haven't watched them yet, but someday when I want to do some consumption, I'm going to sit down and watch those with intentionality. I'm going to learn something. Maybe I'll even turn into a stained glass maker as a result. I don't know. But that's the kind of intentionality I want to bring to consumption. But the big point here is when you're doing this maker, manager, consumer stuff, you really do want to focus on what the right balance is for you and keep track of that to see how it's going, because this is a great early indicator if things are going wrong. For me, it's usually because the manager time has gone down too far, but for you, it may be just the opposite. Or maybe you'll notice suddenly you're spending 60% of your time doing consumption and very little time making and managing, and that should be a warning sign too. But you can put that together. So as we finish this video, sit down and make your own balance right now. As you know your life, what's my balance of maker, manager, and consumer? And then find a way to track it. But try to track your time for the week and see how much time you spend as a maker, manager, and consumer. See what you learn from that. Over time, you're going to find your ideal balance and try to aim for that. So maker, manager, consumer, it's not a role, it's really a hat, but it's super important. I hope you enjoyed that. If you'd like to learn more, head over to MacSparky.com and click on Field Guides. You can see productivity right there.